Welcome back to the K-High Coaches Show, our roundtable segment. Scott and I are joined by Gold Country Media's MVP. I think we'd both agree, Mr. Jordan Georgeson. Jordan, welcome, and I'm going to welcome you even further by asking Scott our first question. I think it's time we look at we have league play starting in two big leagues, FVL and the SFL. Jordan, you're our expert on the SFL, so we'll get to you in a minute, but I want to start with the Foothill Valley League with Placer and Lincoln and West Park. And Scott, we're starting the league play coming up this Friday, so your outlook on the league as we go into league play on Friday.
You know, it's been a tough road for the FVL when it looks the non-conference-y,
Yes.
even with Lincoln losing to Rio Linda, and then you got, Placer taking it to Rio Linda the other night. There really seems to be two teams emerging, and last year that's exactly what it was too. Coach Montoya said, I've circled that game at West Park, and if you remember it was 49-14, ended up being 49-42. It was really the first time I saw Placer start to give up some big plays. West Park had the quarterback, Barksdale, who was Devin Barksdale. They
Incredible.
Still have some really, really good players. Sisson, the wide receiver, and defensive back. And I think that it's coming down really to those two teams. You don't want to push Nevada Union or Ponderosa or Oakmont or all these other teams just to the side. But if you just look at the body of work heading into the FVL League, you think Lincoln looks a little bit down. Placer's going to play them in 2 weeks. Placer plays Ponderosa this week. I think you really just have to circle that home game for Placer when they play West Park. And I really do think it's going to be a good game because they're going to test Ryan Miller. It'll be interesting to see how healthy Placer is because they looked healthy last week. Mm-hmm. If they continue to get healthy, it's going to be tough to beat Placer this year. But West Park's got a lot of athletes. They got a lot of guys transferring in. Just ask the Oakmont coaching staff in Roseville.
And they also play a pretty good schedule, preseason schedule, not quite as good as Placer's, but a pretty good schedule nonetheless. I think maybe not a dark horse team, but a team maybe on the rise. As we saw them last year in Nevada Union, they had a very young quarterback and a young team, and they were blown out by Placer, but they also made a nice comeback and put a lot of points on the board. So I'm looking for Nevada Union to kind of emerge a little bit this year in the FVL.
Oh, no question at all. We both said it. They made the playoffs last year, and I think they were catapulted by that game that they played against Placer. Was the first time they said, all right, it was kind of going the way most of the games go. Placer's going to blow you out. It's going to be a running clock. Nevada Union said no. They just kept throwing the ball deep down the field, kept getting touchdowns, made it a game. The final score was 62-31, but the second half was won by Nevada Union, and Nevada Union took that momentum and carried it into the rest of the season, got themselves into the playoffs, and their coaching staff, their team remembers how close it was. And the thing you could do is that Nevada Union game is right before the West Park game, and there's the old trap game. Go up there, go into the friendly confine or the tough confines of Nevada Union Stadium. Everybody in Grass Valley's out for the game, and they're just going to play with reckless abandon, as they say, let it rip. So watch out for Nevada Union. If there is a wild card, I agree with you 100%. It's Nevada Union.
Yeah, it is the friendly confines, but it's also beautiful up there.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
It is fantastic up there. And Jordan, I know you've kind of expanded your scope this year. You're covering a lot more teams than you used to, and some of those teams are in the FVL. I know you're more on Lincoln now and probably West Park. So what's your impression of those clubs?
I think this is a situation, again, like Scott says, last year, it is a Placer and West Park race with NU being the wild card. Lincoln, it's a situation right now. They're sitting at 0-5. I don't think they were expecting to be 0-5. I know certainly I wasn't expecting them to be 0-5. I had them around 2-3 at this time. I know River City and Rio Linda, they kind of got punched in the mouth a little bit in those games. But if you look at Lincoln's team from last year, they had, I want to say, like 5,400 all-purpose yards or something like that. And I think 5,399 of those all-purpose yards were recorded by a senior. They have one all-purpose yard that's returning to that team this year. So you're essentially having a hard reset and a full roster turnover. I want to say they graduated something like 24 players. And it's a situation right now where, that school's already lost a lot to 12 Bridges opening up.
Right.
The athletic programs, just aren't, when you essentially get gutted in half with a new school opening up, it's going to be tough. And then I think coming out with a lot of young guys, inexperienced guys, the writing wasn't on the wall for Lincoln this year with that. It's going to be a tough little stretch of games for them this year, and it's going to be interesting to see how they fare out in league, because I do think this is a team that might be a little better than their record shows, but I don't necessarily think it's a playoffs are written on the walls for them. But I do think these next 5 games are going to be huge as to how they end up going into next season, because if you go out there in league and you lay an egg at 1-4 and finish the season at 1-9, next year you might get a lot of kids that might be like, I don't want to go play football next year. I might want to go transfer. But if you go out 3-2, winning the last couple games, maybe you're competitive with Placer or even West Park, then you might get some kids that are like, maybe we can build off this moving forward.
Yeah, we've talked about that a little bit with different coaches. And 2 years ago, remember, Jordan, Lincoln was fantastic. They came up to Placer and they just put a beat down on him. Last year was a different game, but as you said, they've lost a lot of their players. It seems like they've lost some of their players and graduated 2 good senior classes in a row. So then we've also got, as we said, Nevada Union, Oakmont also in the league as well. So it looks like it will be basically the 2 teams coming down. But the thing that, Scott, and you've mentioned this before, even if that's true, you still have to go out and play the games. We're talking about 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, so you still have to play the games. And so Placer, I think, basically coming off the 0-4 start with the win over Rio Linda, can kind of make a big statement to everybody when they go up to Ponderosa this week.
Oh, no question about it, because they made a big statement on Friday night coming out of the bye week, and they did it in a lot of different ways. They had new players they brought up. They spread the ball around very, very well. We just talked to Coach Montoya about some of the adjustments they made on the offensive and defensive line. A real source of pride for him on both sides. When I went out to practice this year, last year it was interesting before the season when they went 10-0. He was with the offensive running backs and trying to get his junior quarterback, Josh Craycraft at the time, ready to play. This year when I went out with him, he was with his offensive line because they were all young and new, and I think that's his source of pride. And I also think the offensive and defensive line is really what can make or break a team. Obviously, I mean, that doesn't break any earth-shattering moment there, but really, if they can come out with enthusiasm and energy and open holes and create things, there's nothing better than an offensive line when they are just going downhill, running the ball, and I think their attitude can really carry Placer this week against Ponderosa, and a lot of that goes on the offensive coaching staff is this game's on you. And again, we are not looking at the scoreboard. We are looking at how many yards do we get per carry. And there's a lot of games on Friday night against Rio Linda where backs weren't even touched, so they were 10 or 15 yards down the field. That's the offensive line. Same kind of thing that they're looking for. When was the first sign of contact? So this is and if they know they're being geared on that, we didn't see a lot of penalties Friday night. No holdings, very few offsides. So their blocking, their technique was good. So those are the things you look at. Did we win the turnover battle? Did we win the penalty battle? Were our backs getting downfield 10 or 15 yards before they were touched? Those are the kinds of things that Placer's going to be looking for. And if they can do that Friday night, they're going to be very tough to beat in the league.
And the other team we've talked about, West Park, you were talking about them before. And Jordan, when we talk about West Park, now Barksdale's not there, but it seems like a lot of the other names, Scott mentioned a few, it seems like a lot of the other names that were keys last year are back. And so that's going to be a very veteran team. The experience factor might be with West Park when they come down the pike as far as taking on Placer. So how much does that factor in for them?
I think it does factor in a lot, and I think West Park is a team that I don't want to say they're getting overlooked because I've seen a lot of people, even though Placer's gunning for a 10th league title in 11 years, I've seen a lot of people say that West Park, as of right now, seems like the favorite going in. In my opinion, Placer deserves kind of the fulsome treatment in this league of, hey, you know what, I'm picking you until you give me a reason not to. But that experience that West Park has is going to be huge. I know they don't have Barksdale, but they have a lot of other guys returning to that team. And I do think they're coming in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder thinking, people kept saying, how are we going to replace what Barksdale's done? But we're 4-1 going into non-league, and look at their last win. They just beat Chico, who beat an SFL team in Whitney by 10 the week before. So it's not like West Park is any slouch coming in. This is a team that, in my opinion, is a top 15 team in the region. And I think Placer is too, even though the record might not show it. And these two do seem like they're on a collision course for that first place game.
And we will be talking about that game, obviously, once it comes up. I think it's going to be one of those situations, Scott, like we saw with Del Oro and a couple other games, that Placer's going to need all the Hillmen to come out and support him in that one. You mentioned an SFL team in Whitney, Jordan, and so I think we shift our attention over to maybe the best league in Northern California, Sierra Foothill League. And the incredible thing about it is there's 3 games. They're opening the schedule this weekend, this Friday. There's 3 games on the schedule. Any one of them could be like the best game in Northern California on any other week. It's amazing the quality of those teams. But why don't you talk a little bit about the league, because you're pretty familiar with it, and also the lineup of games just this Friday.
Well, I mean, if you look at this league right now on Max Prep's top 25, not even top 25 in the section. Top 5 in the section for the top 5 are SFL teams. It goes Folsom, Oak Ridge, Rockland, Del Oro. Granite Bay is probably hovering at like 7, and Whitney's probably hovering at 9 if we're really being realistic. I mean, that league is just loaded from top to bottom. The slate that they're having, I love that they started off with rivalry week. They do it every year. Next year when they're adding Jesuit and Davis, they're actually moving rivalry week to the last week of the regular season. Also a cool thing.
Not a bad idea there.
I just love that it's all on the same week. You know, this Friday you got Folsom, Oak Ridge, Del Oro, Granite Bay, and you have the Quarry Bowl. And in my opinion, those 3 are the top 3 rivalries in the area, just with what they do year in, year out, all those schools. I mean, everyone in the SFL is a football school. It's loaded with Division I talent. You have 3 5-0 teams in Rockland, Oak Ridge, and Del Oro. You know, Folsom and Oak Ridge are fighting for that, probably a D1 section title, and could potentially be playing a D1 NorCal game. Rockland right now looks like they could be up there with the favorites to be going to state in Division II. And Del Oro with Caden Pinnock, they might have the best player in the section right now, and he's a guy that's so electric that as long as you have him, it doesn't matter who you're playing, you're in any game.
And it seems like, and you mentioned him a couple of times, but it seems like almost Rockland gets not noticed, but kind of under noticed, if you will, with all the attention on Folsom and Del Oro, Granite Bay, and Oak Ridge. So it seems like Rockland, maybe, as you mentioned, 5-0, but they don't get noticed as much as the other teams.
And I agree with you. In my opinion, I actually feel like I would give Rockland the nod over Oak Ridge right now in terms of the team that has the best chance at challenging Folsom. I know Folsom coach Paul Doherty has told our Folsom Telegraph writer Matt Long that he actually feels Rockland is the most talented team in the league. Now, I know Doherty is kind of the type to, I'd say maybe undersell his team a little bit sometimes.
He's not Lou Holtz out there where, the other team's the greatest team he's ever
toughest
seen.
Navy team I've ever seen.
Oh, my gosh.
But, you know, him saying that he feels Rockland is the most talented team in the SFL, that holds some weight. And in my opinion, Rockland does very much have the tools to beat Folsom, and this could be a team that wins this league. I wouldn't be shocked to see an SFL with maybe a 2-3-way tie, but you know, they have a strong quarterback in sophomore Reeves Sloan who has looked better and better every week, and he actually had a Caden Pinnock-like throw on Friday against Tracy where he scrambled out, was about 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and everyone's sitting there going, what are you doing? Throws into double coverage, and you just want to rip your hair out, and all of a sudden Rockland tight end Gavin Correa comes down with the ball for a touchdown. And it's little plays like that, you know, we always think, what are you doing? That's an ill-advised throw, but with these great players in this league, it may be an ill-advised throw, but they always seem to go their way. So at what point is that just talent? And that Rockland defense as well is no joke. They have been a stonewall for teams to move on.
Incredible athletes in the league. And Scott, I know you know Coach Paul Doherty a little bit, so you have more of a perspective on the Folsom experience. So how are they looking so far this season?
Well, the one thing about Folsom is their defense has been better than it's been in a lot of years. If you think about it, they lost to Sarah by 7 points. They lost to De La Salle the other night, 14-7. Mm-hmm. But if you look, they had the ball down inside De La Salle's 20 2 times and didn't turn it over on downs. Weren't able to put it in. One of the things De La Salle did differently this year than they did last year is they went back to the old veer, and they literally just churned it up, and they had the ball 8 of the 12 minutes in the first quarter. So Folsom's defense was on the field. It was a very, very physical game. Going back to your point about Rockland, remember who beat the SFL winning streak that Folsom had? It was Rockland. And then they had to come back and beat them in the playoffs, and they lost to Granite Bay that year when they had the quarterback issues. He finally got healthy for the playoffs. I still think Folsom's the best team in the section. Mm-hmm. If you think about the quality of teams that they've played, they blew out Monterey Trail. They blew out Turlock. They when their wins that they've had, Edison blew them out. Their losses, they've lost 2 games by a combined 14 points. It was funny to me to look at the scores Friday night and realize that, you know, Granite Bay and Del Oro and Oak Ridge, I think they were all off. One of them might have been off, but they were all off. I had no doubt in my mind they were all sitting in the Folsom stands watching to see what can we do. And the one thing you can't implement is what De La Salle does with running the football and how big their offensive line is. I know, talking to Coach Doherty last week, he said we didn't have a great week of practice. I know if I talked to him today, he said we didn't play well. They got beat by the better team. But now it's almost like that's what they want, because the only chance they have to go avenge the loss to Sarah or avenge the loss to De La Salle is to win out, look impressive doing it, win the Section 1 title, and then go play them in NorCal. So I think they'll use this as motivation. I still think they're there. I think Jordan's right on. I think everybody's sleeping on Rockland. I think they get in. And then I really think it's between Oak Ridge and Del Oro for that 3-4 spot. I mean, but again, the league's stacked. I mean, we haven't even brought up Granite Bay. Carter Jackson, one of the best backs in the entire section. They beat Vacaville. They've got a great record. They're well coached. It's just a stacked league.
Yeah, another great year in the SFL and a very interesting league as well in the Foothill Valley League. Thanks, guys. That will wrap up our show for tonight. On behalf of my partner, Scott Gordon, we thank Jordan Georgeson and our special guest, Coach Joey Montoya. We thank you guys for listening. Remind you to tune in Friday at 7:30 when the Hillman Open League play at Ponderosa. Good night, everybody.